here, but the sister chromatids don't separate. And so these are the possible gametes you get. You can get some normal gametes, you can get a gamete that has 3, one that has 1, and then here you don't get any normal gametes because it happened in the first meiosis. You get 3 here and 1 there. So now you get a romantic evening, and you get a sperm and an egg, one of which will have the wrong number of gametes, and you have a zygote with an extra chromosome in this regard. It can also be the opposite, where this only has 1 chromosome and 2 here, you have 3 chromosomes instead of 4. So the most common of these, the most common of these non-disjunction events end up in miscarriage. So nature takes its course and gets rid of them because they will not be viable or are not viable. But occasionally, there are some that are viable. Down syndrome is one of these. We call it trisoma 21. So here's a karyotype. You can see it's got an extra one. These individuals typically have some telltale physical characteristics. You see this little guy here. It affects about 1 in 700 children, so it's fairly common. I'm sure most of you have been around or know an individual with Down syndrome. But these individuals, they can, even though they all have Down syndrome, because there's a range of disease, some of these individuals can live relatively normal lives. Many of them will die younger, usually in their teens or 20s, sometimes even younger. But some can live on into adulthood and live very productive lives. It's not a fair disease, but it's just the way it is. So there are some risk factors involved in Down syndrome that we figured out. The older you get, the more likely, not the more likely, the older the mother gets of a child, the more the risk there is of having a child with Down syndrome. So here at 20, you have almost a 0% chance. There is some chance that you can have a child with Down syndrome, but for whatever reason, it usually has to do with what's going on in the mom's ovaries. As she gets older, those non-disjunctions happen slightly more, and so you get an increased amount of abnormal gametes in the eggs. So here at 35, this is usually the red flag age. So when you go to the doctor and you say, I'm pregnant, and you're 35, they usually do a lot more tests. Usually before that, even though there is an increased risk here, you don't have to worry about it. Yeah, I've had my wife, and I got married when we were 28. We had all our kids in this range right here. We're now 35, and so she's a little worried, but we're also done having kids. They're all up at night, so we don't even know them to mess it up anymore. But at this age, now they start doing a lot more tests. Why do they test? What do they can test if a fetus is going to be a Down syndrome baby or not, but why do they test? Keep track. What else?
Well, do couples choose to test, or do doctors test them? The
doctors typically advise the people to do it, but you don't actually have to do it if you don't want to. I don't believe. Or you do want to do it, because sometimes Down syndrome babies get larger heads in them. You don't want that thing getting too big.
So do you feel like kind of like ethical things to say someone was going to have a baby and then when they're older and there's a higher chance of them having abnormalities or whatever, and so maybe for abortion purposes?
That's exactly it. So most of the world just says, oh, I don't want a Down syndrome baby, even if you are the best mother in the world or father in the world, is a challenge, because you don't know if that person, you have that baby, you don't know if it's going to be, you're going to have to take care of that person through their 40s because they're a disabled individual, or maybe they're going to be a little bit more, it'll be a less severe Down syndrome and they can live on their own. But they're going to need a lot more help. So a lot of these people will get screened, and if they find out it's a Down syndrome baby, they can just abort it. It's super easy, no big whoop, right? Obviously, that's a little different for us. We choose to do something else. We choose not to worry about it. So when you go to the doctor, your doctor may not know your feelings on that. You definitely still should get screened if you have kids past this age, because kind of knowing what's coming down the pipe, so to speak, is, or I guess literally, is you can prepare. You always want to know. But my sister kind of went through this, not at this age, a little bit earlier, but she found out some things about her baby that were incredibly difficult. Both of her, one of this kid in particular, was diagnosed with a disease that basically wasn't going to live. So the baby was born early and died after 8 hours. And the doctor did the test and said, this baby is not going to live. I suggest you abort it right now. She obviously didn't want to do that because of religious reasons. But she, I would say in those 9 hours that she spent with that dying baby, were some of the special moments in her life. But she did lose the baby. It did die. Most doctors would say to abort it. So anyway, looking at this curve, that looks extremely scary. First of all, who in their right mind would have a child at 50 years old? It does happen, and some are oopsies babies, but you look at that line and you're like, oh my gosh. But somebody interpret the graph for me. Why is this not such a huge deal?
Because it's 80 children per 1,000 children.
Right, so that line looks scary, but this maximum is only 80 per 1,000, so 8%. So if you have a child at 50, if you are just insane enough to have a child that old, you only have an 8% chance. That means you have a 92% chance of having a baby that's going to be normal. So all the way down here, I mean, this is an increased risk, and there are some things that your doctor will talk to you about. But you can still have kids all the way to your 50s if you want to. So maybe you can reach that 70 trillion that they're trying to do.
Oh my
All right,
gosh.
so Down syndrome isn't the only abnormal. Isn't the only non-disjunction. There are other non-disjunctions, and many of them are related to the sex chromosomes. So Klinefelter syndrome, you get an extra X chromosome. So these males actually end up being, I'm trying to remember, these guys actually are a little bit, they're a little more feminine. Sometimes they have large breasts, things like that. But I mean, these are in the population, but they're not very common. They can have an extra Y chromosome, and this usually doesn't have too many complications other than the fact that the male is usually a little bit taller. Yeah, I can't remember anything else. These XXX are normal females. They usually have normal intelligence. Was the same book anything about these guys?
Page 140.
Huh?
Page 140.
What does it say anything about? I can't remember the details of these things.
It can't be distinguished from XX females except by karyotype.
Yeah. So really, there's not much of a problem. Potentially, some of you in here could be an XXX, but just because you're normal, they never test for it, so you never really know. Turner syndrome. This is XO. This is one of the few instances where an individual will actually have more or less than, will have less than 46 chromosomes, so 45, and end up being relatively normal, although they do have problems. They have a little bit extra skin on their shoulders, going from the neck to their shoulders, and they're usually a little bit small. I believe in Klinefelter and in Turner, they're both sterile, so they can't reproduce.
Yeah.
So that's obviously one complication. Anybody ever heard of an individual that has any of these? There's always this rumor that's out, yeah.
I met a guy that has a
Klinefelter.
Yeah.
Alright, so was he relatively normal, or could you? So just a little bit. The most famous, there's always this rumor that Jamie Lee Curtis, the actress, is XYY, I believe. I can't remember now, or maybe XY, whatever. But whatever it was, I think it was XXY. She has a Y chromosome, but obviously she's a woman, and it's turned out to, no one's ever actually confirmed it. It's just this rumor floating out there. So who knows? I don't know if she's even human.